to the channel. You know who it is by now.
Jimothy.
So ladies and gents, we are here. It has been a while since I spoke to you guys, but as I explained on my community post, my computer is not doing the greatest at the moment, so I'm actually working on getting a new PC, but that's something that's a little bit further on down the line. But for today, ladies and gents, we are doing a rogue tier list. Now, let me preface this with an apology. Obviously, I'm not going to have every single rogue deck on here, and if I did, this video will probably be about twice as long, but we do have a few categories in terms of where I'm kind of like ranking these decks. So starting us off, we've got borderline meta, which are the decks that are quote unquote pushing a meta decks. You've probably seen some of these topping in the most recent like tournaments that have been going on, YCSs, regional events, all that kind of stuff. Solid option, which is probably just a little bit a rung a little bit below the borderline meta decks. Then we got This Is Awkward, where we don't quite know where this deck should be. It's not quite meta, it's not quite just completely unplayable, so I've decided on that. I'm here for the memes. This is just a deck that you take to local just because you want to like troll or just resolve some wacky combo or something along those lines, and it is a no from me, a deck that I just would not play. So with that out of the way, let's get straight into it now. Arga Stars, I'm going to leave this in This Is Awkward. It's getting support, and it probably will continue to get a bit of support. At the moment, I just don't think it's strong enough. I feel like the deck needs a lot of things to go right for it to be able to play, and it's just horrendous going second. Like, setting 4 traps going second is never really a position that you want to be in, unless you're like Lab, where you've just got those blowout traps. But having continuous traps that obviously can be removed from the field is a bit of a problem. So for me, this is where this deck lies. Fire King, this needs no introduction. It's still topping to this day, ladies and gents, which I think is just crazy. Like, not even just Dinkabooey, there's other people that are playing the deck and having success with it just because they kind of like know how to play into the meta, and any destruction based like I don't know, meta is always going to favor Fire Kings. Obviously we've got Malice running around, but with the number of non-engine spaces in a Fire King deck, it's quite easy to cripple Malice. Malice has got a little bit of kryptonite, which kind of just works against the deck. Sharks, I'm going to leave it in This Is Awkward. It is not, as an engine, it's pretty strong, but as its standalone deck, it's obviously lost some power with both Bahamut and Dweller just gone, and those were two mainstays of the Shark deck. That's not to say that you can't still play the deck, and it does still have plays. It's nice to be able to go for a different line, especially going into Stealth Kraken, but it's nowhere near as strong as it once was, and I feel like every now and again Sharks will just get one more extender, which doesn't actually push the deck any further. It just gives it other avenues to just kind of like do what it's already doing, so I don't feel like it's getting any better in that sense. Blue Eyes, specifically the Primite version, obviously this is just a borderline meta deck. I probably shouldn't even have it on here, but it's more so the Primite engine which is pushing this deck to where it is at the moment, not necessarily Blue Eyes by itself. Phantom Knights, I actually don't know what I've got this on here for. It is actually, you know what, Phantom Knights, I'm going to say, is a solid option just because I've seen it top, especially with some of the horror stuff. I've seen it do some interesting things, and it's a little bit stronger than these decks down here in my opinion, especially the way that it interacts with your opponent. The continuous traps they definitely make a headway in kind of like impacting your opponent's game plan. So I do quite like PK for that reason, but I don't know, maybe it will be further on down when I put some of the more of the other decks on there. Mathmech Ignista, specifically Mathmech Ignista, I think is pretty solid. I've seen a few people do a few things with it. Somebody showed me a combo the other day, and it does go hard, especially with the new Ignista stuff, which funnily enough is actually designed for Ignista, so it is interesting to see. And Nibiru is not a problem. If your sequence you plays properly, you can actually play through Nibiru quite successfully, so definitely an interesting list, something to watch out for, especially with the link spamming. It's nowhere near as strong as Malice, so if you had a decision between this and Malice, obviously you're going to play Malice being a stronger deck, but it is definitely a solid option if you're talking for more of a rogue strategy. Christian, this needs no introduction. This is probably up here at the moment. I think it's alongside Fire King for a viable borderline deck. It's been topping recently. Probably shouldn't be on this list, but I'm going to include it just because it's still quote unquote rogue. There's still a few players that just kind of like pick the deck up, but there's quite a few players that kind of like, I wouldn't say disrespect it, but just kind of discard the deck, and I feel like it can do a lot, especially with the way that you can build it, whether that's Kashtira, Horus, like it is very, very strong. Plunder Patrol, oh my days. I wish this deck was stronger. Like I said, this was one of my favorite decks. It's very, very complex. It can do a lot, but it's just not playable. The discard cost is heavy, especially if there's any kind of negation on the field, and every single card in your deck, all your extenders, they run into Ash. Well, all the significant ones anyway, they run into Ash, which is a bit of a problem. That's not a reason why you shouldn't play the deck, but with the heavy discard cost, it can be a little bit of a problem. Still like this deck though. I feel like it's one of the better designed TCG archetypes, so I'm going to leave Plunder Patrol here for me, for now. Dinos, I'm going to say it's probably better than these. Dinos is an interesting one. I've said this previously, and I've said this many times before. Miscat 2 makes Dinos a little bit difficult to beat over, a little bit difficult to interact with, difficult to kind of engage with. But Miscat 1, it makes it too easy to engage with Dinos. So it's like, it's a finely balanced deck, and it hinges on one card realistically. So yeah. Ice Barrier, I'm going to put this in. This is awkward. It's probably stronger than Argus Stars and Sharks at the moment. And the reason why it's in This Is Awkward is because it does have some solid plays. But there's a lot of decks out there that can do what Ice Barrier does a little bit more efficiently. I think that's the best way of putting it. It can play a lot of hand traps. It draws into a lot of your deck, so you will see side deck quite consistently if you're resolving combo. But that's a big if, and its combo is a little bit fragile in my opinion. If you don't see enough extenders, you just stop playing, which is unfortunate. Next is Heroes. Obviously, Heroes is always gonna, you know what? Yeah, Heroes is a solid option. I feel like obviously there's been new hero support announced that's coming down in the future with the masked hero stuff, and that does look very, very, very strong indeed. But currently Heroes are always going to be a strong meta choice. I just feel like at its current iteration, there's still a few flaws with the deck, so something to bear in mind. Unchained, borderline meta, it's solid. It plays into a couple of the charmies, which does not help. But the funny thing about this deck is you can actually draw yourself. If you build it correctly, you can actually draw yourself after like the first or second search, which means that you can play under the charmies a little bit better than some of the other decks if you're playing Droll, which is something that this deck definitely does. Orcust, again, the support is so close, ladies and gents. It's like, it's almost there. At its current iteration, you're definitely only taking it to locals for the memes. Currently, it's still strong. It still can do some bits and bobs, but once it gets its support, it's going to skyrocket itself all the way up until like borderline meta, in my opinion, just because it grinds. And there's a few players out there that kind of like the way that Orcus plays, where it's a bit grindy, but it can be this explosive link deck if you sequence your plays and build your deck correctly. So definitely one to watch for the future, as well as having lots of space for non-engine, because the Orcus engine isn't that big. So if you are playing pure, there's something in it for you. Branded, oh man, I'm gonna leave that in This Is Awkward. It's obviously it's probably at the top, to be honest. It's probably stronger than a lot of these decks that are here, but it's just branded fusions at 1. It's still playable. There's still things you can do. Obviously Draco Tail's coming out, so that's something to bear in mind. So that's probably why they hit branded fusion to 1, because I don't want Draco Tail overextending into the branded archetype and vice versa. So I could see why it's at 1, but it's at the moment it just doesn't do enough compared to the other decks that are out there. Tilament, you're definitely here for the memes. It's too inconsistent to be able to pop off properly. Obviously there's ways that you can build the deck, but I just feel like people who play Tilaments now are still coping. Yes, it was strong. Yes, it can be strong, but it's too inconsistent to be like anywhere up here where like the borderline meta decks are. So in my opinion, I could be wrong anyway, ladies and gents. Live Twins, definitely this is one to watch. Live Twin Fiendsmith is busted. I don't feel like people have experimented with this strategy as much as some of the other strategies that are out there. So it's definitely one to watch, but it's definitely borderline meta in my opinion. I feel like it can do so much with the new edition, and I still think there's going to be cards down the line for this deck because it seems to be like a fan favorite. Dinomorphia, ladies and gents, solid option. I don't care what anybody says. This deck, if built correctly and played correctly, is so difficult to get over. It puts a skill drain on field, which is backed up by counter traps. Like, there's not much more you can say about that. It's difficult to get over. However, the problem with Dinomorphia is your opponent can burn your resources in a sense where there's other decks out there that can grind. Like the Fiendsmith engine will just burn so many interruptions from the Dinomorphia player to the point where they're just out of interruptions and the Fiendsmith player is just allowed to play. So it's definitely one to watch, but it's got like YCS tops and all that kind of stuff, and I just feel like people just don't respect this deck. I think it's very, very strong. Regenesis, I'm going to put this in borderline meta. Not many people have messed about with the deck at the moment, and it's obviously still kind of establishing itself. People are still a bit unsure about the builds. I've seen some builds with Vanity's Fiend, I've seen some builds with Kashtira, I've seen some Pura builds, and it's a little bit all over the place, but obviously it's top to YCS, and obviously there's more support coming down the line, so definitely one to watch, and probably some cards you should think about just kind of like trading for when you go into locals, ladies and gents. Definitely interesting. Ascend, yes, we do have chaotic elements, but it's a definite no from me. Like this deck, I wanted it to be I wanted it to be good. The artwork is sick, and then you just play the deck and you realize, yo, this deck does just nothing, like nothing at all. So just, yeah, it's a no from me. Drytron, solid option. It's probably one of the more stronger decks in solid option in my opinion. We are seeing less bestials, which is always good for Drytron. Obviously we've dropped Drew Swarm down to 1, but I feel like Drytron is a little bit overlooked, especially the fairy variant, because we've got Ava back, and Herald of Perfection is still a card, and having a card that says non-once per turn Omni Negate for as many fairies in your hand as possible is super strong, ladies and gents. So something to bear in mind. And then going second, Zeus is always a card, and you can just play main phase too. So definitely something to keep in mind. Pearly, this is awkward. It's probably borderline. This is awkward and a solid option. Pearly is interesting. It can't play well into some of the decks that are currently out in the meta unless it gets some support, which is something that's going to be interesting to see, because there have been some leaks or some suggestions that Pearly will be getting some support down the line, so that will be interesting to see where it ends up after that. The same goes for Exo Sister. Now Exo Sister is an interesting one. I'm going to put it in this is awkward, mainly because Exo Sister have got an in archetype dweller, but the problem with Exo Sister is the plays are just too slow. Like you just can't get going. And I've said this before because I played Exo Sister. I took it to a regional in Tillaments format, and I feel like it's just a couple of cards short of being playable. I feel like the archetype is somewhat inconsistent or incomplete, and I feel like Konami is going to address that when it does give it some support in the tactical tri deck. So obviously watch this space for Exo Sisters, but in its current iteration, yeah, it's just it's just awkward. It's just awkward. Kashtira, obviously it's always going to be a solid option. You can play a bunch of hand traps. The bodies are big, very, very similar to Regenesis. Obviously Regenesis play Kashtira cards, but all in all, it's just a solid option. It's not the greatest deck. It can struggle to kind of like set up a board strong enough for your opponent not to be able to play through it. But going second, if you build it as a going second strategy, because the bodies are so big and there's so many interruptions with these with the deck, it can be quite viable. So something to bear in mind. Dark World, I'm here for the means. I've always said this is the best deck going first in game 1. Games 2 and 3, no, it's just a no. You're actually memeing. It's stronger than some of these decks down here, but yeah, it's just no. Chimera, again, solid option. It's not meta, but it's very, very close to the meta. There's the few I wouldn't say glaring problems, but a few significant problems, which puts it in a position where it just can't do what it wants to do. It requires multiple cards, which can be a little bit of a problem. And then obviously fusion summoning is not as efficient as some of the other mechanics out there, i.e. link summoning. So for that reason, as well as just how the nature of this deck plays, because you can't play too many hand traps because you need engine, it's always going to struggle, just because you need a lot to get it going basically. Centurion, oh my gosh. Right now, I'm going to put it in I'm here for the memes. I do really like this deck, but I feel like it's just too normal summon reliant, and if your normal summon gets stopped, you can't do much else, and that's a frustrating thing about the deck. Like, I want it to be a bit out. It can put some big bodies on board, and once it gets going, it's very difficult to stop, but it's easy to stop in the build up to getting to that point, if you get what I mean. Like one Ash, one Ghost Ogre, like it's just, yeah, your turn just gets shut down too easily. Labyrinth, this deck is just, yeah, this deck's solid. Probably one of the top meta decks at the moment. Well, sorry, top rogue decks. If built correctly, it can put in so much work. Those trap cards that it sets are just, yeah, it's busted. Manadium, you're here for the memes. Goblin Biker, I'm gonna put it in This Is Awkward. It is a solid deck. You know what? We'll put it in solid option. I'll put it in solid option just to be fair. I was gonna be a bit unkind to Goblin Bikers, but obviously seeing them in Memento and seeing them in their own list, I feel like they can do a lot more, if you get what I'm saying. Shining Sark, I know this has got support. I'm gonna put it at the top of This Is Awkward. Nobody's actually messed around with this deck. The Dark Magician support will be somewhat viable in this strategy, so it's interesting. I don't feel like Shining Sark does enough for it to make itself anywhere near the meta, and I don't think it's supposed to. It's supposed to be just one of those fun decks, but it can be a stronger fun deck if the right support comes along. And the new Dark Magician girl, the apprentice that came out in Alliance Insight, has definitely helped with the deck's consistency, because getting to Shining Sarcophagus was always your main problem. But yeah, it's looking pretty solid, but at this moment in time, it's just a little bit awkward to play. Gem Knights, again, this is one for the future. That's why I'm leaving it in This Is Awkward. At the moment, just no. But going forward, it could potentially be a strong option. Voiceless Voice, solid option. Not the top of solid, but we all know that there's one ritual deck at the moment that's in the meta that just far surpasses Voiceless Voice and what it does. And it just goes to show Konami can design very strong ritual archetypes. They just need to be, or they just need to go about it in a very acute way. So yeah, it's interesting to say the least to see them kind of like facilitate a ritual strategy. Horus, this is like Horus Stun. I'm going to put it somewhere in borderline meta, just because it plays all the horrible floodgate-y type cards you can imagine, as well as just having big bodies on board. And the Sarcophagus card, the one that sits in your back row, the continuous spout, is a problem, and it can dwindle you out of resources very, very quickly. And it does pair well with stuff like things like Crystron, which is has been noted by some players. I think Steven Santoli topped with it in YCS Providence, I think Rhode Island, so definitely one to keep an eye on. Mimighoul's solid options, probably better than some of these decks down here. I'd probably say it's on par with Heroes, if not better. Mimighoul's is solid, I'm not gonna lie, it's very, very solid. Like, it can do a lot, and it's got a lot of space for non-engine if you play more of a pure variant. I've seen some builds mix it with Kashtira, but as a pure variant, I think it's pretty strong. You can play Nib, Ogre, all the stuff that you would expect, the Charmies. So yeah, for that reason, I'm gonna leave it there. Oh my gosh, Magispector Kirin, Magispector generally, just no. just no, it's not happening. Glad Beasts, yeah, This Is Awkward. Solid deck in terms of a rogue strategy, but just it falls short, mainly because I think it's just more to do with representation. I think the deck is actually pretty good, but I haven't tested it enough to say safely that it's a solid option. So I'm going to leave it in This Is Awkward. It's probably at the top of This Is Awkward, to be fair, or towards the top. So yeah. Memento, this is This won a YCS, so that's all that needs to be said about this deck. This is probably a meta deck, to be honest. But again, because of its representation, because there's not that many people on it, they don't probably view it as that, which is why it could considerably be considered a rogue deck, just because it's not really seen play outside of a few dedicated players. Bestial Control, solid option, is what it is. Enough non-engine, you can just hand trap your opponent to death. Naturia, yeah, this is awkward. No. Millennium's solid, you know. I'm not gonna lie, it's got a very predictable game plan. It's easy to play. It's difficult to stop, even though you know what it's gonna do. But it just gets outpaced by some of the combo decks out there. And running hand traps in this deck never feels good, just because you've only got a few cards to play with, and you can potentially burn yourself to be able to start your plays, and that is never a good point to be in, especially in this day and age where Yu-Gi-Oh is moving so quickly. Vanquish Soul, I don't care, I'm being biased. This is one of the best rogue decks, even currently. Where's Raisin God? Why has he gone over there? Come here. So even currently, in my opinion, my humble opinion, I have been going to locals despite the lack of upload, ladies and gents, and I have been cooking with this deck. I've been getting third, second, pretty consistently with Vanquish Soul. Like, if you know your interactions, it can do very, very well. And when the new support comes out, ladies and gents, especially with the K9 stuff, you better believe you are going to be seeing this at regionals, and potentially even YCSs. So keep an eye on this deck, and if you're planning to play the deck, get the cards now, ladies and gents, because they're going up in price. Generators, yeah, it's a no from me. Crystal Beasts, I've literally put this in here. I'm gonna put it over here, and this is awkward. I've literally put this in here because of Dread Guy. I watch him play Crystal Beast, and I think there's no way that this deck does as much as it does. Like, there's just no way. I just don't get it. He's playing little to no hand traps, and the deck just keeps going and going and going, and I'm perplexed at how he's managed to do that, especially through the amount of boards that he's playing through. So I don't know. Maybe I need to test this deck and actually see it for myself, because you can play a couple of ways. You can play the Crystal Conclave Control, or you can play the Wombo combo deck variant. So yeah, it's interesting. I've got Ignister on here twice. Let's leave that there. Man with the Mark. I'm going to leave this in at the top of solid option. Obviously, top when it first came out, but we're seeing it less and less at the moment. And there's a few players at my locals that are playing it, and they've said to me, like, if you just stop Man with the Mark, you're putting your opponent on a very sticky situation where they just can't do much else if their hand does not facilitate it. There's not a lot in the way of extenders, so yeah, it's strong to say the least. Activating trap cards a turn that was set is always going to be powerful, because some of the most strongest cards in the game are trap cards. So yeah, Speedroids, I'm going to put in this is awkward. It's probably a strong one. Sprite, solid option. Nothing much needs to be said about Sprite. It's been around in the meta for a while. Sword Soul, yeah, you're probably here for the memes. Even with the new support, ladies and gents, just no. It just can't, even to some of the rogue decks above it, like, it just struggles. It just needs something else, and I don't know what that is. Tempai is still a solid option. I've seen Tempai, Kashteria, Fiendsmith, Tempai, Kashtera, Bestial, like, yeah, and Tempai is just Tempai. Like, if you burn your opponent burns all their resources, and then you normal summon Pydra, it is a great feeling. Rescue a solid option. I was playing this for a bit. Set 4 from the deck is always going to be good, but at the moment it's a no. Yeah, Salamangreat, love-hate relationship with this deck. It's not, is it awkward? Nah, it's still a solid option. It's just not stronger than these decks up here. So you're only really gonna play it if you're gonna go to your locals and that kind of thing. I believe I've got Dinomorphia on here twice like a clown, so ignore that. 6 Samurai, yeah, you're here for the memes, ladies and gents. I got Shining Sark on here twice as well. Trap Trick, same thing. It's a no from me. It needs some support. Before you even think about playing this deck, think to yourself, is there another deck I can play? And if the answer is yes, play that deck. Tistina, same thing. Yes, Chaotic Elements have come out, just like for Ashend, but just no. This deck does one thing go in second, which is Book of Eclipse. But guess what? you could just play Book of Eclipse. Moving on. Raid Raptor, you're here for the memes. It's still a strong strategy, to be honest. In fact, I'm going to put this in This Is Awkward. Setting up a 6k or 5k towers can just be enough sometimes, and it's very difficult to beat over. Even with access code talker, like targeting like a Link 3 engrave still probably isn't enough to beat over the Raid Raptor. I can't remember its name now, the rank 13 XYZ monster. So definitely a solid option, just something to think about, ladies and gents. Yubao, this is up here in a borderline meta. I'm gonna put it, it's probably stronger than a lot of these decks here. It's just that it dies to every Charmy, like literally every Charmy. Same with what's the forgot its name now. Ritual Beasts. I'm gonna put Ritual Beasts in This Is Awkward. Yubao's a little bit stronger than Ritual Beast. It's got an alternative win condition in the fact that it can reflect damage, which I think is the reason why I've put it in the borderline meta. Yes, it can play into some of the Charmies that are in the format, but just being able to crash into an opponent's monster can actually put them in a situation where they could just die out of nowhere, which I think is a good thing. Ritual Beasts do not have this option though, and they summon from everywhere, so they're getting hit by every single hand trap you can think of, and their plays just are not resolving, which is unfortunate for them. Even plays into Lancia, which is crazy. And then the last one on here is Draco Slayers. Sorry, not Draco Slayers, True Draco, which I think, if you're playing True Draco right now, I think you're here for the memes. I think the reason why Masterpiece came off is because there's a little bit of synergy with Masterpiece and the Argo Star cards, but yeah, True Draco by itself is just not where it's not where it's at, ladies and gents. It's not where it's at. But that is it. If I've left off your favorite rogue deck, definitely get at me in that comments section below and just, you know, flame me in the comments. I'm here for it. Like, I've got thick skin, I can take it. Also, if there's anything that you disagree with that you would probably move around, feel free to let me know in that comment section. And we find ourselves at the end of another video. As always, if you do like this content, you know what to do by now. Hit that like button, share, subscribe, all of that beautiful good stuff, and I will definitely see you guys on the next video. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.